You all saw I was wearing a blazer. I pretended to be a professional for at least the first 2 seconds, and then took a meter off. I've also had like 7 Diet Cokes today, so this may be a very frenetic talk. We're going to see how it goes. I chose the ever so manly colors of pink and purple for my email and Twitter. Feel free to email me anytime or shoot me a note on Twitter if something here interests you and you want to talk afterwards. So, I'm going to start off with an unusual question. How many of you have seen me talk before? Okay, sorry. Because everyone else hasn't, I'm going to try and do the abbreviated like behavior change version stuff so that at least everybody else gets to where we are. And I promise if you stick with me to the end, I'll talk about some of my new research and some advanced stuff. Does that seem like a fair bargain, people who have seen me talk before and will not be too annoyed by it? Okay. So, this will be a very casual talk. I encourage you, as I'm going along, to like raise your hand and be like, I don't understand what the fuck you just said, do it again. So, feel free to call out or get my attention. My name is Matt Wallaert. I'm a behavioral psychologist. So, I came up through academia studying something called JDM, Judgment and Decision Making. So if you are hiring in your startup and you're looking for a guy like me, go look for people in psychology programs. And I specialize in particular in changing human behavior. And when I say JDM, judgment decision making, psychologists use a sort of version of decision making that is not the common parlance. I don't necessarily mean like the very conscious, like, do I want this thing or that thing? I'm going to, like, with the front of my brain, think about those two things and then logically choose one. Often when we mean decision making, we literally mean, let's call them non-conscious or sort of half-conscious choices, like what did you wear today, right? Very, very few of you probably looked in your closet and with all of the cognitive might and logic of your brain went blue or white, this or that. You sort of like stumbled to the closet in a dreary pre-coffee haze and how you slept and lots of external factors, including the weather, changed how you dress. So actually, weather is a perfect example, right? We know, okay, if it's a big sunny day, people are going to choose different kinds of colors than if it's not. So lots of these kinds of unconscious things. So what I want to talk today is how do we go mess with people's minds given that, right? So all of you, if you're doing a startup or really whatever you're doing in the world, are trying to change people's behavior in one way or another. You're trying to get them to do something or to stop doing something or to get them to do a pattern of things. And so what I want to suggest is that there's a pretty organized way that you can think about going and making those changes. So someone call out their favorite candy. M&Ms. Okay. Did you know, by the way, if you ask that question, the first thing anybody says is M&Ms. You always get M&Ms. They're like the classic candy. So we're going to do, you didn't know there was going to be like meditation doing this, but we're going to do a visualization experiment for a second. So imagine a beautiful, wonderful bowl of M&Ms. It's chocolatey and good. Everybody loves chocolate except the people that don't, and they can leave now. Beautiful, wonderful bowl of chocolate M&Ms. Now imagine that I put it up here with me. Nobody is going to eat them, right? Because getting up and walking up in the middle of a talk and having these M&Ms is way too rude and people aren't willing to do it, and so they don't do it. So imagine that my job is to get you to eat M&Ms. The easiest thing I can do is move them in front of you, right? If I handed you a bowl of M&Ms, now you will unconsciously and mindlessly eat all these M&Ms as you go through your thing. Now, why does that matter and why am I talking about it? It's not profound in any way. Here's the point. The M&Ms didn't change. I did not in any way make the M&Ms more delicious, or, I haven't made them peanut butter chocolate M&Ms, which are clearly the superior M&M, right? Like, I have not done anything to actually make them more attractive. And yet, if we had taken a different approach, if I had said to you, hey, you got to get people to want to go to the gym, the first thing that you say to me is, well, you got to make the gym more fun and more attractive and more of all of these other things, right? Despite the fact that we know in our minds that the thing that keeps me going to the gym or from going to the gym is not that it's not fun, it's that it's like over there and I have to put on gym clothes and it takes a bunch of time. We know this intuitively, and yet we generate all these things where we have to make more delicious M&Ms. So, what I want to suggest is a couple of things. One, I tested all of the markers. We're going to go with green and black tonight since they're the most awesome, really dark ones. This, by the way, is like, usually black is the first to go. This is the most amazing black marker I've spoken with already. So what I want to talk about is inhibiting pressures and promoting pressures. So promoting pressures, up arrow, I love to think of things in actual physical pressure sort of ways. Up arrows, that's the deliciousness of the M&Ms, right? It's the fact that I'm hungry and so I get calories. Your body naturally, all things being equal, your body wants you to eat M&Ms because we want to be alive, and M&Ms make us alive, sort of. But at least gives us some caloric intake, right? So mainly it's that they're delicious. I'm just going to do sprawly things, and they have calories. So, then there are inhibiting pressures. There are things that prevent me from eating M&Ms all of the time, right? If there were no inhibiting pressures and they were delicious and my body craved calories, I'd just sit here and all the time. I'd be eating M&Ms. I'd be eating M&Ms right now. But there are some things like, for example, cost, right? Pay for M&Ms. I have availability, right? It's not like someone follows me around, maybe when I'm rich. It's not like someone follows me around with a bowl of M&Ms and is like, here's your endless bowl of M&Ms. I can fill it with more M&Ms, right? And that's your adventure forth, and then it's unlimited beer. But cost, availability. There are some dietary things, right? Where, like, I don't know what happens if you eat that much chocolate, but I can't imagine it's anything good. You eventually die of diabetes or other things, right? So there are, like, diet constrictions. So there are all these negative things. Okay, are we with how we feel so far? Yes, nodding. Okay, good. So, it turns out that we are really, really, really bad at doing this consciously, right? We, as product designers and marketers and other things, tend to make a series of errors. So the first error is that if I make the sentence more, people automatically generate promoting pressures, right? This is what I was just sort of nodding to. So if I say, get people to do something more, and then I ask you all to brainstorm, we almost inevitably will come up with lots and lots and lots and lots of suggestions that are all about adding additional promoting pressures. Now, why is this a problem? One, diminishing marginal returns. Like, it's tough to make M&Ms more delicious than they are, right? Everybody, we are all relatively smart people in this room, some of us more so than others. This lady is clearly, the M&M lady, very smart. Although I don't know how she's feeling about the peanut butter M&Ms, so I'm going to hold judgment until we get there. But, you know, we're a bunch of smart people, but if you sat us in a room and said, can you make more delicious M&Ms? Maybe we're going to come up with something, maybe. But they've really done everything that they can do to make M&Ms delicious, right? Like, they've tried them with peanut butter and pretzels and all sorts of other, like, probably we're not going to come up with the next flavor of M&Ms in this room. There's a diminishing marginal return to how good you can actually make an experience, right? And it is increasingly costly as you go along, right? Like, making the incrementally better tasting M&M costs a lot more money than just making them more available, right? Getting more stores to carry M&Ms. So the first thing I want to convince you is that when you make a more statement, like more X, don't forget about inhibiting pressures. And in reality, where most startups end up being disrupted, where most people end up doing product disruption, is in the inhibiting space, right? So think about Uber. Uber's my favorite example, right? Uber started with a very specific behavioral statement. We're going to call them cabs. We can debate whether they're actually cabs later. They started with a behavioral statement. They said, if I won, people would do nothing but take cabs. They would never drive a car again. They would only take my cars from place A to place B, right? I love, if you want to test your product, you want to pressure test, go all the way to the extreme, right? If I was $1 billion company, what would the world look like, right? What does winning look like? So winning for Uber looks like everybody takes cars everywhere. Now, what did Uber's competitors do? And I don't mean like Lyft and things. I mean the people that Uber originally was competing with, which was black cars. Right? What did they do? They said, hey, we're going to make this experience better. It's going to be a stretch Hummer with an amazing sound system and a disco ball, and it's going to be in every way this awesome car experience. And you know what? Nobody started taking cars anymore, right? Because it's really, really hard. I only want to get from point A to point B. You can't really make that any more attractive than it is. Maybe you can, but probably not. Uber won, or is winning, because they did the precise opposite thing. They said, The minimum bar is getting people from A to B. That's the promoting pressure. People just want to move. How can we remove every single inhibiting pressure that we can get our hands on? How can we make it easy to hail a cab, easy to pay a cab, as cheap as we can possibly make it? And they carry this out to this day, right? If you get an email from Uber, most of the emails you get, you can pay attention to this from now on, so you can be looking for this. Most of the emails you get are about, hey, by the way, we made it cheaper. Uber X's used to be, $10 and now they're $9, right? They didn't say, hey, and now Uber X's will be like filled with disco balls. The one concession here might be the water. They put water in the back, which is a subtle and cool thing, I guess. But I don't think anybody is saying, yeah, Uber's $1 billion company because they put water in the back of cars. Right? I don't think that's the dominant narrative. Also, by the way, Uber in Philly is not very good. Awesome in some other place. I'm trying to use it this week. I'm like, wow, where am I just regular Uber X cheap-ass drivers? You guys are black cars only. I'm just very sad. Very sad. It's a man who did a lot of walking this week. How are we feeling so far? Good. I will pause and take some questions if people are like, what the fuck are you talking about? No, we're good. Okay. So, tenet 2 is a natural extension, which is that we do the same thing when we make less statements. So, let's say you're in the business of making people stop smoking, right? Health-related behaviors. The natural thing that we all will get together and do in a brainstorm is put in punishments, right? We put in all of these inhibiting pressures, right? That's where with our mind, when we say less, naturally goes, right? So just like when we make more statements, we automatically, right, think about these. I should have done this the other way around. When we do less statements, we automatically think about inhibiting pressures. So, what I want to suggest is that because these two postulates are true, and we know them to be true, we need to get more formal and more logical in our product design. Or at the very least, we need to be more intentional in our brainstorming. So what I want to suggest is actually drawing stuff out. No one can read what I wrote anyway, so I'm going to erase it. So, what I want to suggest to you is that when you are trying to design your product, and everybody should go spend some time doing this tomorrow, A, do I have a concrete behavioral statement that is true if I win? Right? Do you know if your education program, your startup, your anti-smoking campaign, what happens in the world if I win? And I want to be clear about what I mean by a behavioral statement. Right? I was actually working with some folks today in the city government, and they were making statements that they thought were great behavioral statements. They're like, if everybody, if we win, people will think this. Nope. What's the behavior of thinking? I can't measure that. How the hell do I know if I won? Right? Because everybody told me so? What's the behavior? Right? If I win, people stop smoking. Right? They don't feel differently about smoking. I don't want to do a thing where they're like, and I like smoking slightly less than I used to. Right? You can come up with some sort of measure for that. It's not actually a behavioral statement. You want to know what the behavior is. Right? Uber said, if I get this right, people will take cars. Right? And usually, I want to encourage you to think about an alternative, the sort of converse statement, right? So Uber actually has two statements. It is, A, if I do this right, everybody will take cars, everybody will take cabs from point A to point B, and nobody will drive, right? There will be a secondary point that is the converse of the original behavior. Now, why is it important to say both of those statements? It's because of those biases that we talked about, I guess. It's because of these biases that we talked about. Right? By making both a less and a more statement, it puts us in a place where we are better able to brainstorm around both of those behaviors. It overcomes some of our natural biases about how we do this kind of product planning. Right? So, Uber needs a statement like, take cars, drive less. Now, this is not strictly true, right? Uber could still become $1 billion company if everybody both took more cabs and continued to drive more, right? Could be that just people travel around more, right? They could expand the size of the market. The problem is that eventually they hit the cap of that, right? You could only spend so much time, there's only 24 hours a day. You could stick me in a car and I could shuttle around 24 hours a day, right? But at some point you hit the cap of the market. So you want to really put some thought into a sort of converse thing that is, what is the competing behavior to the thing that I'm doing? So if I go back to my gym example, right? People who go to the gym watch less TV because there's a finite amount of leisure hours in the world, and you can only do so many things when you come home from work. And so it is true that there are these natural competing behaviors along with going to the gym. Right? Now, you could watch TV at the gym, and so that's not a perfect example, and nothing I ever use will be a perfect example, and you could just laugh at me later. But you get the point, yes? Yeah?
Can it be as simple as students will use Bing more in Google Ads?
Yes, so it could be students, yes, as an example for me, it could be like students will use Bing more and they will use Google less. I'll note, although that's not actually, he's talking about a program that I designed recently called Bing in the Classroom, encourages digital literacy among kids. We'll talk about me about it later. Interestingly, that's not what we started with, and it's not actually the point of the program. Because Microsoft, and this is a good conversation, you are so good, you said it so well. This is a good conversation to have, which I would have skipped over, about really thinking about what the point of your company is. It isn't just to beat your competitor. You're actually trying to do something in the world. So if you're Microsoft, right? Bing is owned by Microsoft. Computer literate people are Microsoft customers. How many people here own an Android phone? You're a Microsoft customer. Why? Because you make a crap ton of money off Android phones because they license a bunch of our technology, right? Computer literate people, in one way or another, pay Microsoft, right? It may not be like getting Windows, it may be lots of other ancillary things, but one way or another, like, we're going to get some of your cash. So if we want our, like, our revenue to go up in the world, we need more computer literate people. So what we actually started with, and as we started doing the thing, was what can we do to increase the amount of searching that kids are doing? And again, a good behavioral sentence is very specific. So what can we do to increase kids searching for non-required questions? Meaning, it is not simply good enough for me to say, hey, by the way, I'm just going to give them a bunch of worksheets and they're going to copy the questions off the worksheets and put them into Bing or Google and get back answers. That is not what I am interested in doing. I'm interested in them answering authentic queries. So be specific in your behavioral statement, right? It is specifically for them to do queries that are non-school required about their own authentic curiosity. The less statement, okay, was not have less questions, right? We want kids to have more questions. We want them to be more authentically engaged in their own curiosity. The less question was abandonment. So what we wanted less, I can't remember what the exact statement was. Someone that works for me came up with a very good statement that I liked, but I can't remember off the top of my head. The less statement was, I want kids to have fewer unresolved queries, right? So I want kids basically to have less questions where they're like, that's not worth answering, or that's unanswerable, or it's too hard to answer that. Right? I want to make them feel like every question can be answered, and that they are constantly pushing the boundaries of the questions that they are answering. Great question. We want to be really specific in this statement. So first thing tomorrow, go write your behavioral statements, a more and a less. Then, I want to suggest that you should actually draw arrows. Like, literally draw arrows, right? And try and say, what are all of the things that make people want to do the thing that I want them to do? Right? What are all of the promoting pressures? And as you want as many of them, and if you've designed your product well, if you are tackling the right question, let's say if you're at early stage and you haven't quite settled on what you're doing, these should be as authentic as possible. And what I mean by as authentic as possible is they should be things that people already want to do without you having to tell them. Right? Now, that's not always true. Like, nobody is like walking around being like, laser tag. Right? You have to sometimes tell them, I mean, yes, but originally, like, it's not like the caveman was like, laser tag. You know, that didn't happen, right? They did, however, want to get from place to cavemen were like, I would really like to get from place B, A to, I would love to get to those mountains. faster and easier and other things, right? So they had these authentic desires, for the psychs in the room, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? There are lots of different things that people want in the world, and we can talk through why they want different things. You can just go read about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Or, here's pro tip number 1. Academics are the cheapest advisors you will ever get, right? Because if you buy them lunch, you can find a grad student that will tell you amazing things that will blow your mind for like the cost of a beer, right? Like, we do not need complicated things. You don't have to give 10% of your equity to something in order to do these things. You could just literally look for the closest university, find a professor who studies what you want to do, try and get them to have a beer with you, and if they won't, just go to their grad students, okay? And just ask your nearest psychologist about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and presto. So, as many authentic things as possible. Then, what are the things that are keeping people from doing that? What are all of the possible things? Now, look, there are typical ones that we all know, like cost and distance and other things. They may be perceptual things like shame, right? They can be emotions or feelings, right? It could be lots of different kinds of things. And that's good, because sometimes the solution is product, and sometimes the solution is marketing. Right? It is tough. I could design products that would make you feel less shame. Like, there are things we can do within product to make you feel less shame. But there's also a marketing piece of that. There's a messaging and communications piece of that says, hey, I have to help people understand, that this is not necessarily a shame-based thing. So, you got your promoting and innovating. I want to make it slightly more complicated. I'm just drawing a box. Right? So, after you've done this brainstorm, what you've done is write the target behavior. I will have you note, every time I do this, I choose something different on top. She didn't even notice. I was going to tease her. She didn't even notice that I was staring at her. No love. Okay, so you have a target behavior. You also have competing behaviors, right? So it goes back to like I said about the gym. There are some things that as your thing goes up, other things are going to naturally have to go down, right? And you want to know what those are, and you want to fight against them, right? You want to figure out, you want to do the same exercise, but in opposite, right? Because you actually want to do 4 things, right? You want to find ways to increase this. That's not going to help at all. I already used up arrows, right? So all things being considered, I want more of this, less of this, more of this, less of this, right? Because I want my thing to be as attractive as it possibly can be, and I want to make it as easy as it can be to do. I want the behaviors I'm competing against to be as, ugly as they can possibly be, like low attractiveness, and I want them to be really hard, right? I guess I probably am an L. There you go. Much better symbol. It's probably letters, they can mean anything. Is this making sense?
Yep.
Yes. I'm going to do an example because only he said, yeah. I needed more nodding. Now you're stuck with an example. Smoking. This is one of my favorite examples of naturalistic ways that this happens. So, we have actually done an amazing job. I think is that a signal that we should stop for a beer? Is that what?
Just me.
Just you? Just only you get a beer. I would say I will rattle for another 5 minutes. Then we'll go and get a beer. I'll give some advanced stuff and we'll do some questions. Does that sound fair?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. People have stopped nodding. I think people are getting tired. So, smoking. But does anybody know what the very first thing we did to target smoking was when we decided in the 70s? We were like, smoking's killing people. What are we going to do? Anybody? Labels. Okay, labels was not actually the first thing that we did, but it was a powerful thing that we did. Right? We put big fucking labels on here that was like, this will kill you! Right? For those of you that have know what Maslow's hierarchy of needs is, there's very few things that are quite as motivating as, by the way, this will kill you. Right? We have powerful genetic things that are like, no, procreate, don't die. Right?
Taxes.
So, taxes. That's the first thing we did, was taxes. Right? So, labels and taxes. Right? What is the first thing you do anytime you're trying to change behaviors to make shit more or less expensive, right? Humans are really attuned to money, right? So, big fucking taxes, right? We also did something that people forget about. And You have to be kind of old because many of the people in the room, like, it didn't happen. You gotta call out what it is.
Maybe like the Marlboro Man.
Okay, so the Marlboro Man, right? We got rid of the Marlboro Man. We said, right, you can no longer advertise on television, right? Because we're trying to get rid of this behavior, right? So we took away their promoting pressures. We said, hey, all the things that you used to do to make it cool, you can't do that anymore. You can't do it on television. You can't do it in a movie. You can't use cartoon characters, right? Bye-bye Joe Camel. I'm going to outlaw that shit, right? I actually made them less attractive, right? I weakened all those promoting pressures, right? People, the thing that we realize is one of the reasons that people smoke is because it looks cool, right? So if I don't have to make it look uncool, right? I don't have to go to like the inhibiting pressure side and show you how terrible your teeth will be. All I can do is just be like, those ways you were telling people that it was cool, you can't do those anymore, right? Now we did do that. We did say, by the way, this is why your teeth are going to fall out, and we have that lovely lady right now who's doing the like, closes her stoma with her hand and talks to you like this, and she's dead. So like Marge there, I don't know. So we did do these kinds of things, but we just banned stuff, right? Banning. Now, not being content with that, we also came up with an alternative behavior. I used to use chewing gum because it's true, we actually launched a bunch of, it's not well known, but we actually launched a bunch of programs about like, hey, there's this competing behavior in chewing gum, and we'll like subsidize the chewing of gum, and we'll like make chewing gum attractive and things. Because you can't smoke and chew gum at the same time unless you're crazy. But I will use the more modern example, which is those weird water vapor things, right? Weird water vapor things, which can freely advertise on television. Right? They are free to make that look as cool as possible. I don't know how cool it actually is, but they are absolutely free to run ads with Stephen Dorff being like, I used to be a smoker and now I smoke this water thing. Look at me, I'm cool, I'm Stephen Dorff, I have like stubble and things. I've had a lot of Diet Coke today. So I'm free to do these things that make it look cool because it's a competing behavior. Because you know what? Nobody's fucking smoking and doing water vapor. I mean, maybe they are, but probably not. Right? Like this is a good competing behavior. And so when we want to, as we naturally extinguish smoking behaviors, we want to make some competing behavior. So we put into place a bunch of things that make this more attractive, a bunch of pluses, and then we subsidize those, right? So there are insurance companies that are like, hey, by the way, I'll subsidize your water vapor to get you to stop smoking cigarettes so that you don't die, right? So we made them cheaper, right? Minus cost, right? Insurance companies went and subsidized these things. This is how we beat smoking, and we did. Like, if you look at the statistics on how many people are smoking, like, we did a really good job versus the 70s. 70s, like, everybody smokes. Now, most people don't. Behavioral interventions. Okay, if I say beer break now, is everyone going to leave and not come back? Or are we all coming back?
Coming back.
Totally coming back? Beer break.